Hello! Hello, gorgeous goddesses! I was going to write a really long post today about circles and the miracles that they've created in my life because I sort of feel like the Creative Goddess course is going to be quite amazing on so many levels for so many different reasons. But the one that I'm most looking forward to, apart from the creativity, is the Creative Goddess Circle that I'll be creating and holding this space for. The circle is a private message board that the creative goddesses will have access to, and on that board you can upload pictures of you and your artworks, and also share about your journey. You can share about the course. You connect with each other deeply. And you can also just have fun with it as well. There's a tea party space to have cupcakes in the garden. So I wanted to talk about what circles have meant for me, and how deeply I feel about them, and why I feel like every woman in this world should be able to experience what a women's circle is all about. And that's why I wanted to have the circle component of the course, so that women can begin accessing it from all around the world and begin connecting with themselves and each other in deep and sacred and precious goddess space. I want to give you the story of how I came to become a part of women's circles. When I was 21, I moved cities and I started work at funnily enough, a public service office block. So it's kind of mundane as these things can come, but in the mundane there is always magic waiting to appear, and there's spirit around every corner, even in cubicles. And I met this really amazing woman when I was there, and she just absolutely exuded love. She exuded joy. She just laughed and was completely herself in every moment. I absolutely loved it. I was just enamored by her. And she was in her 40s, and this light just shone so brightly from her. And I wondered what it was that made her so comfortable within herself. And a few months after we became friends, she invited me along to a women's circle. And I'd say, well, what do you exactly do at a women's circle? I've never heard of a women's circle. What is it? And she'd say, she was a little bit vague about it, and she said, it's just women. They come around and we sit in a circle and we talk, and didn't really get into it much more from that. And I didn't really understand how something like that could be so powerful. So it took me a couple of months to eventually get the courage and the bravery to go along to that circle. And I remember distinctly the night that it happened. It was, I think, a week before my 22nd birthday, and I drove a couple of suburbs over. And I was sort of giggling to myself, thinking, I'm driving through the suburbs at night, and it seems like such a normal night, and yet something more is happening here. Something, magic. Feels like it's alive tonight. And I pulled over when I got to the house that the circle was being held at, and I hadn't met anyone who was going to the circle, or who I hadn't even met the leader by that stage. But the door opened, and behind it was an amazing woman filled with love in her beautiful blue eyes, and she was in her 60s, and white silver hair, and just the most captivating, beautiful woman I think I'd laid eyes on. And she just, grabbed me and embraced me and welcomed me so deeply into her life and into her circle. And she pulled me into the hallway, and the hallway was just filled with her amazing artworks and sculptures. Then she took me into the next room, and opened the door, and there was this circle of fabric lying on the floor, and there were shells and roses and candles lying on it, and there was pillows and couches gathered around this centerpiece of light. And sitting on all these couches and pillows, there were these beautiful women of all different ages and backgrounds and lives and stories. And I thought, I'm at home. Suddenly I'm at home for the first time. I've really felt it deep in my belly. Here's where I belong, with a circle of women. Feels like the most natural thing on earth. And I sat down, and we waited for others to arrive, and I remember looking around the room at these women that I'd never met before, thinking, they look so familiar. They look like sisters. They look like women that I'm going to, love for the rest of my life. And I will. So the circle began, and we passed around a talking stick, which is Native American tradition. And you can use a simple stick, or you can use a larger embellished stick. And what it means is, when you pass a talking stick around, when you hold a talking stick in your hands, you're the one to speak, and you share your story, you share what's coming up for you, what's in your energy, what you're dealing with. And while you're holding that stick, you are held with unconditional listening. And it's amazing how in our lives we don't actually get to speak without being interrupted. We don't get to speak without stopping. We don't get to speak without following our spirits and what our spirits want to share out into the world. And yet in a circle with a talking stick you do. And it was the most incredible experience to actually speak from the spirit and be listened to from the spirit, and to be met with such unconditional acceptance and love for who I was, from where I was, for whatever I was going through. It was just perfect. So yes, that was my first women's circle. It was filled with such gladness, and I felt like for the first time I'd seen the mists of my future kind of come back and fade into the distance, and that I could see the stepping stones that were in front of me, like where I was supposed to go on the next path. And that night when I went into sleep, I asked myself, how was that? How was that thing that you had avoided successfully for so long? And all I could see was yes written on my body. Yes. It was how it was supposed to be, and a whole new passion for life and for love and myself was reawakened in that moment. Since then, I've been a part of lots of different circles since then, as leaders have moved into my life and out of my life. And about 3 years ago, when some of my mentors decided they needed a break from leading circles, I decided I didn't want to be without circles again in my life, and so I began running my own, and felt that call inside me to hold this space and create this beautiful space for other women to come home to themselves in. I remember when I first told my mum about women's circles, she didn't understand either what it was about, and she was a little bit concerned. I think maybe I joined some sort of cult. And a couple of years later, she came to visit me, and I took her to one of my women's circles, and she absolutely loved it. And she said to me later, I don't understand, why I thought it was such a concern, yet it was the most natural thing in the world for me to circle with other women. And I think that's so profound and so beautiful, and so what many people's experience of finding a circle at last can be like. I wanted to talk a little bit about how come it feels so natural. Why do women's circles feel like coming home? Well, it really has only been a couple of 100 years in the thousands of years, hundreds of thousands of years of human civilization that women have stopped circling together. And women circling together to share and connect and communicate as women about being a woman, about being a goddess, about connecting with the earth and their creative gifts and their wisdom. You know, that was an integral part of our societies not so long ago. And somewhere along the way we just forgot to circle with our sisters and to learn from other women and to learn how to find the goddess inside ourselves, to learn what our wisdom is and our gifts are, and to stand really strong and centered in them. So my favorite quote about women's circles, it's the thing I just say over and over again, is that every time women circle, miracles happen. And it's absolutely true. I've seen it every single time. When women open up to themselves and open up to their beauty, share their stories and listen to each other's stories, huge, amazing, starry, incredible miracles happen. You see the light begin pouring out of women's eyes again, and you see their beauty reawakened in a whole new way. So that, gorgeous goddesses, is why I absolutely adore and am enamored by women's circles, and why I want every woman in this world to experience what it's like to be a part of a circle, to be held in that beautiful sacred space with her shining soul and her sisters. So I hope you're all having an amazing, gorgeous, shining day. I certainly am. It's about 4 o'clock in the afternoon here, and Charlie's napping under a tree over there. So from me and Charlie to you, all our love, joy, gladness and spirit. May you always remember how beautiful you are inside and out.